We're getting near to the end of the year, at least at the time when I'm filming this, and that means a new version of Rebelle has been released. We're at number 7 already. Rebelle 7 has been released. Is this lucky number 7? Let's find out together in this review. I've powered up my laptop, connected my tablet, have my pen, have my drawing cloth, started up Rebelle, so I'm ready to dive into the review. If you know what Rebelle is already, then I would say use the timestamps and go to the parts which you want to see the new features. If you don't know what Rebelle is, stick with me. What is Rebelle? Now, according to EscapeMotions, the creators, they've got this headline and it says, "Unleash your artistry with hyper-realistic painting tools and groundbreaking technology." I totally agree with that. That is a great headline because that is what Rebelle does. Rebelle mimics natural media in a really great way. I've been using Rebelle since version 3 and we're now on version 7 already. So you can imagine that's quite some years ago. I started using Rebelle and I've never looked to any software. Well, I've tried other software, but I've never replaced it because it is my favorite painting software. It mimics natural media very well. And for an artist that uses a lot of natural media, that is great because you can just switch from one to the other without having to relearn everything, because most what happens in Rebelle is just what happens in real life with a real brush and a real canvas too. When you start up Rebelle, you start with this window where you can set your paper sizes and you can pick your papers. Now I've got quite some papers collected over the years, but you get a small selection when you buy Rebelle and you can buy a lot of papers on their website. And all these papers actually work as papers. So if I would pick a hot pressed or a cold pressed watercolor paper, the paint will react on it differently. If I choose a canvas for oil, it will react on it differently, and there's all kinds of papers, but I'm not going to pick one. I'm going to leave it on the standard that is aquarelle for today. So watercolor paper, I'm going to just say okay. Now this is Rebelle. This is what it looks like when you start it up, I would say out of the box. Boy, it's not coming out of a box anymore, is it? That's a long time ago. Software came out of a box, but when you download it, install it, it looks like this. Right here you have all the brushes, and right here you've got colors and the layers, and you can tilt and rotate the paper and so on and so on. Now over here are some brushes. It's now on the oil brushes, and on the oil brushes you get a nice selection of round brushes, flat brushes, knives, crunch brushes, very nice brushes. You got some rakes, some dabblers, and there's some new metallics. We'll get into those later, so we're going to ignore them for now. And if I switch to watercolor, I'm going to get different brushes. I'm going to get watercolor brushes, I'm going to get gouache brushes, sumi brushes, spatter brushes, and granulation, which I can bring into my painting as if you would be really painting. If I pick the pencils, now I got a lot of pencils, colored pencils, charcoal, digital pencils, dry media, and so on. We've got some pastels, dry pastels, oil pastels, some texture, scraping. Everything you do with pastel, well, pretty much everything you can do with pastel is in it, and so on. So that's the brushes. On this side you got color palettes, which you can choose your colors from, and you have layers. Now layers is basically works the same as you would layer in real life. If you have painted something, you let it dry, you put a layer on top of it. The difference is that if you would use gouache and watercolor in real life, you add another layer. The layer under it is going to react, and with Rebelle that is less the case. It will not influence as much, though the colors will influence, but not like the paint will not start reacting. Then I would have to go back to the previous layer. Now the cool thing about Rebelle is it has an engine under it that mimics real life media. To demonstrate this engine really quickly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just pretend I put this right on a canvas straight up so that the water will run down. I'm going to just pick a brush. I'm going to pick this round brush. I'm going to give it a nice size. I'm going to give it a nice color, and I'm going to make it really watery, and I'm going to use a regular brush, and I'm going to get this orange, and I'm just going to paint some paint in and just let it go and let it do its thing. And you can see now the paint is start running down just as it would do in real life. If I put my canvas upright, this would actually happen. Now the cool thing is if I add, let's say, another color in it, that color will start flowing. And that is basically what Rebelle does. Now you can control this in every way you want. You can do less water, you can do stronger paints, less strong paints. With oils you can determine how much oil, how thick it is or how thin it is. I can pause this. If I like this, I can pause this and actually dry this whole layer so that it just basically will stop, and I can do that. I'm going to dry it. If I now put it on again, nothing will happen until I put down some more paint. I can also control the paint. I could put down some water. Let's add a little bit of water here. All right, and go back to the paint. Now the paint starts running again because I watered this, and if I put down a little bit of paint there again, it should start running nicely into the places. As you can see, this runs a lot quicker than this. This goes where the water is and flows again where I've put down all this water, and there it goes. It starts dripping because I put it up right. This is just exaggeration, of course, a little bit in real life, although it would be cool. So then it starts running here, depending on how much paint I put in it. It just like real paint, all the pigments will go down. And you can do this with oil, you can do this with ink, you can use regular pencils, all kinds of things. And that is basically what Rebelle does. It mimics natural media. Now, on top of all this mimicking natural media, you have a lot of features you would expect from digital software. And I can press on this. You have rulers, stencils, you can use reference images, you can create your own brushes or alter them. You can use filters, make it brighter, make it less bright, change the colors. You can edit it. So if I want this to be smaller, I could edit this. So let's say I want to edit this part. I can manipulate it. I hope so. Yes, there we go. Change, this is actually the perspective I think it's on. I can transform it. I can make it smaller, bigger, and you can use all kinds of digital features with it. And of course, the nicest thing is, I don't like this anymore. We just press a button and undo, and we go back to our original state. And that is something you cannot do on a real paper. I wish you could, but you can't. All right, well, that's basically the quick overview of what Rebelle is. The rest of this review, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into all of the new features that Rebelle offers. So for that, I'm going to clear my canvas. That is good. And I'm going to start with just basically going through every new feature one by one. One of the first features, Rebelle has improved the papers and the surfaces. So now it also takes in regard the dents. Now, you're not going to see that unless you have used the previous version. Then you will see a huge difference. Also, the brushes have changed. Quite a lot of brushes have changed and improved. If you're new to Rebelle, doesn't matter if you have the previous version. Yes, there are some quite nice improvements. Like, for example, the blending of the oil brushes has become a lot better. And let me just pick an oil brush and go and pick another color, this one. And here the blending is way more natural. If I ease off the pressure, if I go really strong, then it puts down a lot of paint. If I ease off the pressure, I can really nicely blend in this color in a quite different way than we could before. And of course, you still have all the features where it's really gonna mix in and drag the paint everywhere. It does that a lot better now. The blending is quite a lot nicer than it was. All right, and that is the improvement. These features are both in the standard and the pro version. What I will do first is just go through the standard versions, which are in both versions. The next thing which you have is structures. Now, structures is really interesting. I'm going to just clear my canvas again. What you can do now, you can bring up a window with structures. There you go. And you can bring in on your paper a certain structure, just like, let's say, the paper, but different structures, and use them. Now, one thing they've improved is everything is in libraries now, nice libraries. You can add your own things, and it keeps them also with the colors, with the brushes, with all other things, even with reference images. I think you can create a whole library of your reference images now. I like this improvement. And while we're on that, I'm going to move this. They've done this with the colors too. If I want a different color set, they're now nicely in a library instead of having to browse all that was kind of awkward. Now you can just pick your library and change it. And I actually might want to change, double tapping. There you go. And I can change it, and now I've got a different library. So that works very nice. All the extra libraries under it, that it has improved. Structures we were at. Right. Let's go back to the structures. I've got the structures. They've supplied a few, and you can add your own images and use them as a structure. Now I'm going to just pick that one, click it, and then it comes on your paint. And just as with a reference and other images, you can change the size. You can go really large. I might want to go really large with this. Cover the whole page with it. There you go. And if I start painting now, it regards the structure, but that works basically with everything that is quite transparent. So if you use this with an oil brush, you need to, if I would use this with an oil brush and I want this structure under it, I'm gonna have to dial back on the loading, and then it will regard the structure, but not as good as the watercolor do. So let's demonstrate that. There you go. That's the oil paint. Now I'm going to switch to watercolor, and I've got that round brush. I'm going to do it not as opaque, nice some water, not too much opacity. And there you go. And that's a nice thing. These libraries disappear now. All right, I got this. I'll let it run for a little bit. And now you still see that strong structure in the paper. I'm gonna pause this. I'm gonna hide that structure. There you go. And now you can see, let me move this. You can see the structure. Now here it only picked up, see, a little bit because it's just not transparent, but with transparent paint like this, that really, really works well. And that is a nice feature you have if you want to add some texture on a certain part, wood, metals, things like that. You can do that very nicely without having to paint in all the details. It will pick up the structure below it. So that's a pretty cool feature. Another feature which they have added, improved actually on, and let me remove these structures, I'm going to leave this on, is the ruler. Yes, the ruler has improved. We're going to get a new library too. Now we have the line, we know that. Let me take a pen and a darker color. We already know this. There's nothing changed about that. You get your line, and now you can see I'm doing wobbly line without it. But the next thing is we've got an ellipse now, and that is pretty cool. And you can play a lot with that. So that is an awesome new tool and works the same as with the ruler. We got the options, if you do parallel lines, you don't have to move the ruler. You can just go as I'm doing now. I can't go around because it's too big. There you go. And you can use that now as parallel lines. And let me rotate it so it knows as soon as I move the pen, it basically follows. You can do it freehand. So now I can draw next to it. Oh, I've got them both on. Let me put one. Freehand, I can just move wherever I like, and I can follow this. But as you can see, I'm already off because you got to pay attention with the freehand. And you can lock the controls, then it just locks and you can't change things like that. There's nothing moving anymore now. So if you want to lock your ruler, you can do so. All right, and you got the perspective tool, 1 point, 3 point. There's nothing new there, but you can lock these two. But the ellipse is the new part. It's really cool for arches, rounds, circles, ellipses, all kinds of things like that. You can play with that. And this is kind of becoming a mess like this. Doesn't look good, does it? Not a great artwork today, but it's not about the artwork. It's about what's new. So great improvement, the ruler. The next thing they added are paths. Now, paths, what they do are basically you can trace an SVG file from Illustrator, for example. If you create logos and things like that, vector images, you know what that is used for. You can bring your vector image into Rebelle and use it to trace it. Now, I'm going to demonstrate that quickly too. They've added some of them, so paths. there should be a nice library. There you go. And there's some standards with it already. Let's say I'm going to pick this tier. There you go. I'm going to move it. And there you go. And what it does, I'm okay. Yes, I'll leave it like there. I'm going to trace it. And then there you go. And you trace that. You can still draw anywhere, but as soon as you come near it, and if I move it again, so if I would be drawing here, it's fine. As soon as I come near it, it recognizes that I want to draw on it, and you can draw that shape. And you can bring in your own shapes, very complicated shapes. And for that, I'm going to actually switch computers for a second and show you something on these paths. I've switched setup. This is my 2-in-1 computer, which I use for this kind of work. This is a photo of a light box I create. And with these light boxes, I create all kinds of tracing paths, and the machine cuts them out, and I create a box like this. This is the reference image. And these are all vector images. This is all made from vector images. So what you can do with that, if I can close this, there it is. This is the same image. I brought in all these vector images into Rebelle, traced them, and then used a 2B pencil, I think, with a nice sanguine color, and colored all of that. I want to demonstrate that. Okay, so in this computer you see a lot of paths. So I brought in all separate, each layer separately as an SVG, as a vector file, and you can bring it in, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to hide you this one. I've got the pencil, and let's say I'm going to bring just that first layer. I'm going to press that, then the layer is here. As soon as I press whatever tool I want, and 5 is a little bit small, I think, going to make it larger. I can start just tracing this, and then once I'm done tracing, I'm not going to trace all of it. As soon as it comes near to one of these lines I've got in my vector file, it recognizes it, and I can trace it. Now I can imagine that people creating logos, signs, and things like that would be great to bring in a sign into Rebelle and then start tracing it, and then you can get some pretty cool effects. And these are all these layers. I've put everything on a separate layer. As you can see here are all the layers. And when I hide a layer, see, the outline is gone. And that is at least what I've done with it. But I can imagine people doing with these paths, combined with the structures, doing some pretty cool things. I'm gonna hide that layer of the path. And when you bring in a path, you can move it, you can resize it, rotate it, and everything you like with it. Now, while I've got a different computer here, this is not as powerful as the previous one, and that brings me basically to the minimum requirements. EscapeMotion says the minimum is an i5 with 4 GB and a simple graphic card with 1 GB. Well, from experience, I can tell you, yes, Rebelle will run, but I don't think you get any further than a sketch. You want something a bit more powerful, and the main thing is that Rebelle wants is memory. Now I've painted this in Rebelle 6, not 7, but this is an older one. And as you can see, quite some details. This was really the maximum I could get out of it. This is quite a large image, but with 16 GB, Rebelle at the end struggled. At least with the memory, but not with the brushes and everything. I noticed that this is just an ultrabook with an 8-core AMD in it. I think a 730, 2 GHz, not really a fast computer, not with a huge, it just has an APU, an internal GPU with 2 GB that it uses of the regular RAM, but this works. With 16 GB, you can get quite a lot, and that is actually what they recommend to Intel 7. This is not an Intel 7, this is basically an AMD, but an Ultra. And that works with the 2 GB machine, the graphics card, that is fine. The other setup, which I will be using again in a minute, that has a RTX 260, I think, with an i7 8-core, a lot faster, 32 GB of RAM. And you notice that especially when you do when there are a lot of layers, I noticed that this Ultrabook will slow down, not much, but it will slow down, and you can see that the paint is trailing behind. And with the other laptop, I have no issue. All right, I'm gonna go back to the other laptop. Well, I'm back at my beautiful artwork. I think I liked the other one before. And that was paths. Now I need to change pens because this pen is not gonna work on, this is a Wacom pen, that's not gonna work. This is gonna work, the Uion pen for the Uion tablets. We're going on. What we have next is, we've got the ruler, we've got the path structures, we're at filter layers. Filter layers, what are filter layers? What they added now is filter layers. There's a new button here at the layer, and that is this little thing there, and it's called filter layer. And what you can do now, you can, instead of changing the brightness, the saturation, the hue, the color balance, the desaturation of a layer itself with the settings we had before, the filter settings, you can now add a new layer which will control that but does not destroy the layer under it. A bit like a clipping mask but with filters. So if I do that, you can see here there's a new one above this, above the previous layer, and it will control everything that is under it. So whatever I put, layers I put on top of it, it will not control, but everything that is under it, it will control. And what you need to do is double press on the icon, and then you can change now the brightness of this image. See, there it goes, terrible. I could go less bright, I could change the contrast or add a lot of contrast and close it, and there you go. And if I don't want this, I can hide it and it just goes back to my original layer. So the layer under it is not destroyed, but it is influenced as soon as it's on, and you can add all kinds of filters above it. If I want to change the color on this, I could do that. I'm gonna do a nice saturation. There you go. See, that looks much better. My artwork suddenly improved with a slide of a button. Well, not really, but you get the idea. So the filter layers are now right there at the layers, and if you don't want them, you just switch them off again if you do want them, and that way it doesn't destroy your whole artwork. And if you change your mind afterwards and say, well, I might have done it a little bit too bright, you can just change that really easily now. And you can of course change then local layers and add other layers on top of it that are not influenced. Pretty cool. And probably, if you notice, as soon as you have a filter layer, the filters here are blocked. I need to go back to the original layer, and then I can use the regular filters again. Now, not every filter is in it, but quite a few already. All right, that's it. Pretty cool. The next thing, we've got patterns and gradients. Yes, we do. Patterns and gradients. All right, well, let's find them. Before I'm going to demonstrate those patterns and layers, let's get rid of this artwork. Oh, I still got that thing on. I gotta get rid of that. That's nice. Let's keep it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to trace this. Do I have a nice, yeah, let's get a nice red color. I'm going to get a pencil. And that is, oh yeah, that is one thing about the pencils. I don't like this, but I think many people will be happy with it. As soon as you pick a pencil, it is going to pick the standard color for the pencil. And you can actually switch that off. If you go to the brush library, and then I think at where it is at paint, it says default color. If you click this one off, then it just keeps the color which you chosen last. If you click this one on, and actually you can choose a color which you want. So if you always use a certain pen with a certain color, you can create that brush yourself and stick to that color without having to find it. Pretty cool feature. All right, but I don't want it, so I gotta undo this. I've got my different brush, got it set in red, but what happens now, it's blue. And it's blue because I've got these layers above it still. I've got the hue and saturation influencing whatever I'm doing. I don't want that. All right, what we're doing the patterns and gradients. So there you go. There's my tier, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to make sure these paths, I'm going to switch off, and you do this simply by tapping next to it. If I tap onto it, it just activated. Tap next to it, it's gone again. Right, I still had it on. All right, patterns and gradients. You got to go to the fill button for that. The fill tool. So I'm going to fill this. And there we go. Nice. With a red. That's what normally happens. Now, if I want a pattern on this, I want to pick a slightly darker color. Well, a lot darker color. And now we have gradients and patterns. A gradient I'm going to show in a minute. Let's do the pattern first. Let's say I want... this looks like dots. Looks good. I'm going to fill this with dots, and there we've got dots. We can do a lot of things, and I think you can add your own. You can find a file and add your own dots. And I'm going to imagine that you're going to need only a black and white for that, a black and white image, then it would recognize the pattern. So you can do cool things with that. Let's change that. Different pattern. These balls, see? Pretty cool. All the patterns are gone now. We're going to do the next one. That's a gradient. What do you do with a gradient? You can bring a nice gradient into it. So if it has this one already chosen. So if I go with the gradient on that, see? That is pretty cool. I can also do it outside, of course. Should be able to do the whole thing. There you go. And wherever I'm pointing at or wherever I'm starting, I start here, the gradient goes to where I want it to go. This is pretty interesting, isn't it? You can also, of course, create your own gradients. So if I do plus, it copies that one and I could change the colors. I want this to be green. Oh, I didn't choose it, apparently. I need to say okay, of course. Now it's changing it. I'm changing this, and if I do now, it has that green, and you can set all the colors you like. That is a pretty nice addition, and I like how you can control it. That makes it really easy. Go with a different gradient over it. Now everything is gone. There you go. So that is pretty cool, isn't it? So you can do it on the objects, or you can do it on the whole pages, whatever, however you like it. You can set your opacity, the tolerance controls, what it picks, if it recognizes outlines or not. You can even set it on alpha. So if I would set this on alpha, if all is right, if I set this on alpha, it's not going to create a pattern there. It's only going to create a pattern here. So that works pretty cool. All right, patterns and gradients. Oh, did I say it creates a pattern? It created, of course, a gradient. Huh? They updated the user interface too. And I think we've already seen that from all the libraries. Less clutter, and I like that. Less clutter, bringing up libraries, other little windows. I think I do like that. So those are nice improvements. Colors, papers, everything art service has been improved, and it now also runs natively on the Apple chip, the M chip. So for those with an M chip, it runs natively, and that means you should see a great improvement in performance. And I can imagine that the next thing we might actually see is Rebelle for the iPad, since that runs on an M chip too. Don't take my word on it, but that's my guess. And I think that pretty much covers it all, except for one thing. That is the last feature, and that is a Pro feature only. If you have Rebelle Pro, then this is new. Or if you're going to buy Rebelle Pro, then this is new. I'm going to clear everything again. I'm going to get rid of all these fills and stuff. Metallics, we've got metallic paint. If you like glitter, shiny, metallic things, you're going to love these. All right, for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a different brush, to the oil and acrylics brush, and right at the bottom, there's a new section, metallics. There's also a section, color palette with metallics. I'm going to get that one. And I'm going to paint on this with this brush. I'm going to take this flat brush, nice size, so I want it larger, and load it fully. Oh, I'm okay, oiliness, whatever, doesn't matter. And I'm going to paint, and what you see now is no metallic. I knew this was going to happen, of course, because I need to do something. Well, there you go, I'm going to stop here. Now it reacts like a regular brush. I need to tell this layer that I now want it to be a metallic layer. Therefore, there's a new button here. You may have noticed it, a little diamond. If I press that on for this layer, there you go. We've got metallics, and look at that. Now imagine there's a light shining. If I move my canvas, you can see that light influences my canvas differently. And I can influence that, how much, and things like that. And if you go to the settings of this layer, there's a new block there with metallic materials, and you can change the reflection, the scale of this is now quite large. I could do that a lot smaller. There you go. I can make it more reflective, less reflective, and I can add the strength more or less to create a different effect. Pretty cool. Huh? I'm going to keep this scale slightly larger. And you can lock the reflectivity too, so that when you move your canvas around, the light doesn't influence it. It's a different way, but it stays like that. I'm going to put it back on the regular scale, I think. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick a different one and paint that in. Now on this layer, some of the regular brushes, not all of them, but some will pick up some of this metal too. Let's see, I know one of them. I think the hairy brush, where is it? It's gone. Higher, there you go. Hairy brush. If I paint with the hairy brush, see, you get this metallic in it too. If I switch off the metallics, it just becomes a regular flat brush again. If I switch it on, not on it, there you go. See, it becomes metallic. It picks up some of the metallic. Now, not all brushes do that, but some of them actually do that. I'm not sure. They may need some hairs, some more hairy brushes. They will pick it up better. There you go. Looks cool, doesn't it? I want to clear this layer. And what you can do also with this is you can influence this by water and things like that. So if I put down some water, I'm going back to that metallic stuff. Get that flat brush again. It should start running. There you see, it starts running into the water. So that is pretty cool. You can do some pretty cool things, and you see the engine now doing some crazy stuff. You can pick it up. See, it keeps running, and that is pretty cool. I'm going to dry this layer actually. Stop that. All right, good. So that is pretty cool. Now, one thing I'm wondering about. Yeah, how well does this print? And for that, I gotta just give it a little try. That's the nice thing about recording. I can just pause a button and I can just go and come back. I'm gonna do this metallic paint here too. A little bit here. I'm gonna just print this. I'm gonna see what happens on a printer, how well it looks, or perhaps it looks just terrible. Right, I'll be back in a second with a picture. And I'm back. Well, you didn't even notice I was gone. The only thing you see now is a black screen because I put up the camera, the ISO of the camera nice and high because it is terrible weather here. It's really getting into winter. It's dark, the dark days before Christmas, huh? And literally is. But here's the print. This is printed on a graphical laser printer, and I think that looks pretty cool, doesn't it? On some glossy paper. It doesn't have the same shine, but as you can see, there's a little bit of a gloss on it, so that makes it look really metallic. I think that metallic stuff pretty much works too, and looks cool. Well, and those are the new features of Rebelle 7 and a brief overview of what Rebelle can do. Well, brief, probably once I start editing is these videos always take longer to create than you think beforehand, but now we got a nice overview of Rebelle 7 and what it can do. Well, and that's it for this video too. I'm done. The next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a quick painting in Rebelle 7 using all of these new features to demonstrate them, but that will be a separate video, so you can watch that one after this one, and it should come up somewhere around here. You should see it now. Well, okay, thank you for being with me in this video. I enjoyed reviewing Rebelle, and I hope it helps you to get an idea of what Rebelle 7 can do. It can do some pretty cool things on top of what we already had from the other 6 previous versions, because it just keeps on adding and keeps on adding. And now we have some new cool features on top of that. Now the question is whether I would have called this Rebelle 7 or Rebelle 6.5. I'm not sure if it is a full release. Looking at the features, yes, there are some great things and really good improvements in it, and it's worth it, but I think I might have called it Rebelle 6.5. So who knows what we're getting in 8. And Rebelle gets to a stage where it is really grown up now. It has been in infant stages for a long time, but now it is growing up, and I'm curious where they're gonna take this, because pretty much everything that's in it is improved and working really well. Of course, there's room for improvement, so who knows what Rebelle 8 will bring, but Rebelle 8 isn't here. For now we can enjoy Rebelle 7 together.